Hello, and welcome to the first ever recording of the Light Club podcast. I am your host, Patrick Farrell, and I am here today with Emily Romano, who I was recently connected to, but she has a sister that I've known for several years, and I'm super excited to connect with you and do this interview. So would love to have you introduce yourself. Go for it.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. My name is Emily, like you just said, and I'm a coach, I'm a healer, I'm a yoga teacher, and I love to talk about the things that have changed my life, my knowledge, excuse me. I love to talk about spirituality. I love to talk about human behavior, emotions, and yeah, that's what I do for work. And it's also what I like to do when I'm not working.
I love it. Yeah, that's been the journey I've gone down myself, and it's turned into Light Club. And I've been wanting to build a community to find that support for people that are going down this journey themselves for several years. So it's exciting to record this first pilot episode of the podcast to help people find that support. And I think they need support. When I first learned what a spiritual awakening was and went through that process, I thought I was going crazy for a little while, honestly. And we're going to get into all of that stuff. Yeah, we want to be a support system for all of you guys that are listening to find that support, to know that you're not alone on this journey, to know that you are, just like you're not crazy. This is normal things to go through. But before we get into all that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about how we got connected, because your sister has been a big, important part of my life. And we actually met through Instagram, just like I met you through Instagram recently. So yeah, it's like a long journey. Your sister's also a coach, and we
Yeah.
just go for it. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say she's been a big, important part of my life too.
Yeah. So I think that part of like this journey, like we're finding each other. And that's part of like why I think like tools like Instagram are really powerful, is that we can connect with other like-minded people all around the world. And when I met your sister online a year before I actually met her in person, I turned around on Nomad Cruise and she was just standing there. So it's very exciting to now meet you, and I hope that we get to travel together and do that as well.
Definitely. It's interesting because, like, in many ways, technology is sort of antithetical to spirituality and it takes us farther away from it. But in other ways, it allows us to connect so much more easily with people that are on the same frequency. And that's such a gift. So I don't think it's good or bad, but it's just an interesting thing that I was just thinking about as you were talking about Instagram.
Yeah, I think that's been the part of it. It's like actually, as I started to awaken and went down the spiritual journey, I started using Instagram. I started using Facebook to find like-minded people. So it's great to connect with you through this platform so that we can help other people on that journey. But where we got on this call was that we I saw your reel on Instagram actually about spiritual awakenings. And I was like, this is a great topic to start this discussion with, because honestly, Light Club is a space for people that have gone through that process, or even just starting to go through that process, to find that support. So would love to know like your story about your spiritual awakening, and even like what do you define as a spiritual awakening?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because the term awakening implies that you were asleep before. And then for people that consider themselves awake, there's this trap of getting really egoic about it and saying, like, I'm awake, you're asleep. Or then sometimes the language of like, you're a sheep. I think a lot of times people confuse having a spiritual awakening with maybe just like being exposed to information that's not mainstream in the media. And of course, once you do have a spiritual awakening, you're definitely more open to reading things that are not mainstream, because one of the key components of a spiritual awakening is realizing that a lot of the things that you have known, believed, and been taught about the world are probably not real, probably coded in falsehood and ego. And so I guess I define a spiritual awakening as becoming less connected with one's ego and more connected with one's soul. Because we're both, we are an ego, we are a body, we are an animal, and then we are also divine. We also have access to not only our local consciousness, but this consciousness that's shared with everything, with all that is this universal intelligence that some people call God, some people call source, universe. It doesn't, whatever language you want to use is fine. But I think when people have a spiritual awakening, there's a sudden, that's why it's also called an awakening, because typically it's sort of sudden, it's jolting.
Yes.
And you become aware that you're much more than you ever thought that you were. And with that realization, a lot of other paradigms that you used to make sense of your life sort of like fall apart. And you're sitting there and you're wondering, if all of these things that I now know to be true are true, that is incompatible with all of these other things that I used to think and know were true. Where does that leave me? And that's so confusing. And to the original point of the discussion, what we were talking about was when this happens, it's quite literally your vibratory field changes frequency, which is, you could think about that almost like changing a radio station, changing the frequency of a dial. And if you were on, the country station, that means that all of your friends were country, all of your experiences were country, using this analogy. And then once you shift it up and say you're on the classical station, all of a sudden your country friends don't really know what to do with you. You don't really know what to do with them. It's not a match. It's not an alignment anymore. And you think, they're all doing the same thing they've always done and they're all happy. Why am I feeling this way? What's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. And then you sort of retreat into yourself to figure out what that is, because not only can you not understand initially what's happening, because it's just a lot of information happening all at once, but you become so sensitive to energy all of a sudden, which is probably not something you've ever experienced before, that it's not only just a preference, like I don't want to really be around those people. It's like I can't be around certain people, certain environments.
Absolutely. And you said something important. I think it's like a moment where it like shifts, right? And you're shifting to that different frequency. And I had many awakenings. And actually just like being more open to talk about this is kind of an awakening myself. It's been a while since I'm like opening to like talking about these things online, because I was nervous about it for a while. But I did have like a very literal, like we were actually at Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within in 2019 in Los Angeles. And we were meditating with Master Co. And all of a sudden, he does this thing where like he asks us to feel more grateful in our hearts for something. And we're holding the energy of someone else around us. And all of a sudden, I felt it. And my friend felt it at the same time. It was actually a really special moment. I realized a couple of years later, because we had the same spiritual awakening in the same exact moment in time.
Wow.
It was very, very powerful. We're like, oh my God. And I was like, we just believed in that moment that there was something there and there was energy there, and it was a literal shift. So it is a very literal, like jolting moment that happens where you become more aware of something that you weren't aware of before, and your life really does shift forever, because you can't go back to not knowing that after it happens, right?
Yes, that's the thing. You can't go back. It's like the door is open, you can't shut it. And so you're sitting here thinking like it would be easier to go back and not know these things. And then there's also like a responsibility. You feel sort of an, I don't want to use the word obligation, but once you have this awareness of life and our connection to each other, you can't operate the same way either.
Absolutely not. Like you have, like I was a software engineer. I still am a software engineer. I still do it. But like I just realized like that's not my path to just like code for the rest of my life. Like I have to do this. I have to build. I have to follow something that's guiding me to share this knowledge with the world and to create something that makes the world better. And there's a quote, I think, I can't remember who did it, but it was like, before enlightenment, break bread or chop wood, carry water. And it's like after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, right? It's like, it's still the same thing. You're still going down this path, but it's from a higher level of awareness, and where I've put my energy now has shifted in many ways.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And the way that you look at other people shifts as well. because you can't, once you have this awareness, you realize that we are all one. And you're just a lot kinder and gentler with people. And the way that you interact with people changes so much that the people that knew you before may not like that new you. It may be unfamiliar to them. And that's part of the isolation we were talking about, is you become different. And there's sort of like a grief that happens with that. You have to let go of the person that you were, shedding all of those layers. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful experiences you can have, but there's also something that's being let go of too.
Yeah, and it takes new learning. And like I thought I was going crazy for a little bit, so I started looking for YouTube channels and looking
Yeah.
for stuff online. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I? Did I change my brain in a way that it was like not good for me or something like that? And I just started learning and growing. And that's part of it too. Is like you have to then learn something new that you weren't aware of before to make sense of everything that you have now gone through, I think.
Yeah. And I think what happens is like you have this upgrade in your brain and your cellular DNA, and you become a lot more open to receiving information from all kinds of different sources that you never would have been open to or been aware of before. And things start finding you, and the synchronicities that start happening, you'll have a question about a certain concept, and then a book will literally fall into your lap. Oh, that was weird. And things start happening. You start realizing that your mind is so powerful, and all you want to do is consume, like you were saying, YouTube content of people that get it, and read books of people that get it. And one of the cool things is that while you're consuming this content, it's this feeling of remembering something that you knew before instead of having new information enter your mind. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
It does, absolutely. And the more that I've gone down this path, it's taken me years to get to the point where I actually truly, truly believe that we are co-creating with the universe. Because like we kind of like believe that we're just sitting here in this world and we're just a human. And all of a sudden you start to believe that if you set an intention, there's something outside of you, something from a higher power that's helping you on this journey. And actually just doing these calls and meeting people like yourself, I do believe that the universe is helping us to connect right now. And then these synchronicities happen and we are put into places where we're supposed to be,
Mhm.
because the universe wants us to make this world a better place, in my opinion. And we have to work together to make that happen.
Yeah, and then you realize that suffering is definitely a part of life, but life is also meant to be good. And I think I came from a Catholic upbringing, and there was this paradigm of like, if you're too happy, you're probably sinning, and just feeling a lot of guilt about things.
Yeah.
And there, in this new, when you have an awakening, all of those ideas about your own happiness and your own connection to the world are just like knocked off. And feeling good is kind of the name of the game, right? When you're feeling good, good things happen. And when you're feeling bad, bad things happen too. I have so many stories about both of those, like me noticing almost immediately events and situations that align with whatever frequency I'm on, for better or worse.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I don't know if you follow Abraham Hicks, but she
Oh,
talks
yeah.
all about getting in the right frequency first and then taking inspired action. And it's actually something I think that entrepreneurs don't think about enough, is like they think like just push through it, like you're going to do fine. Well, there's an element to that. I'm not discrediting some of that knowledge and wisdom. However, when you really work on for the first 30 minutes to an hour of your day, getting in the right frequency and the right feeling, you're going to have a much better day. You're going to take inspired action rather than forced action. And you're going to get better results because you have better energy to show up to those things, in my opinion. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. And then we know based on quantum theory now that everything is energy. Things are literally go on a subatomic particle level. Things are going in and out of existence all the time, going from being to not being. And so we have the power of creation within us to manifest things. And that's not even just this woo-woo thing. And I don't even want to use that word because I think it's so dismissive, but on a very scientific real level, we are creating our own realities. Like we can
Absolutely.
actually prove that.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize, like, okay, I think a thought to raise my hand, right? Like
Yeah.
that was a thought that made this happen. So
Mhm.
a thought creates a feeling, which is a chemical reaction in your body. That chemical reaction makes an action that happens in the world. And then if you think about that in terms of doing a podcast or making a YouTube video or building a business, well, you had to think the thought before the thing was created in the world. And I think there's a much more spiritual element of that as well, but it's like very practical in general. Like that's what I think I'm supposed to, in with this community, to like bring this like spiritual woo-woo stuff down to ground, because it's very practical as well in this world, in my opinion.
I agree. And I don't know if you relate to this. Well, actually you do, because you just mentioned this at the beginning of the call, is that you're nervous or you had nerves about talking about this. And that's because most of us don't enter a Western society having this awareness. We are sort of indoctrinated with the 3D reality by people that just didn't know any better. I'm sure there's some people that have different experience, but for the most part, we grew up thinking we live in this 3D world, we have to work hard, and all of these things. And we operated most of our lives underneath that paradigm. And there's a lot of people that know us in our personal connections and in our work, communities. And it's a little scary to come out and say, hi, I'm a spiritual entrepreneur. I talk about spiritual awakenings and I believe in sometimes the spirits talk to me.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to say that out loud because people will think you're crazy. And the reason people would think that is because if you heard somebody say that 10 years ago, that's what you would think.
Right.
And it's scary to kind of like come out in that way.
Absolutely. And it's taken me a long time to own it. And like you have to literally become a different person, a different being. But now it's like, no, this is the normal way. Actually, I believe that if you don't know this stuff, your life is going to get harder and harder with the world shifting the way it is. So I think it's really important to start to share this stuff and start to talk openly about it, even though I'm a little scared, but I'm mostly scared about my family because they've been judgmental about this whole thing. But I have to start owning that more for sure.
And I think a lot of people probably feel that way about their families because it's something that's very hardwired in us to not want to be rejected by the tribe. And so it's not even just, oh, I don't know, I don't want them to think this way about me. It's down in our survival instincts to not do something or say something that would get us rejected by the group.
Absolutely. I would love to know like your journey. Like, can you share your first awakening or any like big awakenings that have like kind of changed your path? I think that would be important for people to know where you came from.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I grew up in a very strict Catholic household. There's a lot of religious trauma around that. And as a result of growing up in that way, I rejected anything that wasn't hard backed in science. And I rejected anything that was religious. And to me, religion and spirituality were the same. So if somebody was talking about spirituality, I would immediately dismiss them as just a lunatic or, I don't even know. I just didn't take it seriously. And I didn't have respect for people that lived in that way. So that's where I started out from.
Okay.
Yeah, very judgmental and, obviously traumatized. So then I went from that to being really, really stressed out at a point in my life. And this is a journey that a lot of people will resonate with, is oftentimes life has to become so uncomfortable that you're forced into making a change or changing the way you look at things. And that's what happened to me. I got so incredibly stressed out because I was starting a tech company. And the stress got so incredibly bad. I had to do things to mediate that stress. And one of the things that I tried was yoga. So yoga was actually my gateway into the spiritual world. And I'm now a yoga teacher. I now teach my yoga students about spirituality as well. So kind of a full circle moment. But I go into a yoga class at Equinox because that was the gym I would go to. I would spend 3 hours a day there, just, trying to work off the energy, burn off the steam. And I would go to yoga classes. And if you're familiar with yoga, you know that at the end of a yoga class, there is a period called savasana. And savasana is the period of stillness. And for someone that's very type A, very stressed out all the time, this is not something that they've ever experienced, stillness. And we know scientifically that what that is your nervous system downshifting into rest and digest. And what happens when you downshift your nervous system is that you become in a receptive mode, as Abraham Hicks calls it, And so for the first time in my life, probably I was able to get into a lowered or a parasympathetic nervous system state. And all of a sudden a channel opened. And I had no language back then for what that meant. Um, it felt like somebody telling me something, somebody like almost whispering in my ear, but not in a creepy way at all. And this channel was talking about giving and receiving love. And I came out of that savasana, that meditation, with, really wide open eyes. What was that? What just
Wow.
happened? And so using my very logical three-dimensional mind was like, well, what just happened was I think I did meditation. I think that's what that was. And there's really something there. I don't know what it is yet, but I need to figure it out. And I need to find out what it is from somebody that I trust. So I started Googling meditation. Where do I learn about meditation? And I found Buddhism. And I studied Buddhism in college a little bit, so I knew that it wasn't the same as, say, Christianity, where they're trying to shove an ideology down your throat, which immediately kind of made me feel a little safer.
Yep.
So I knew that Buddhist meditation was something that had been around for thousands of years. That also made it seem pretty legit. And so I went to a Buddhist temple, a Tibetan Buddhist temple in Massachusetts, where I'm from, and I started taking classes on Buddhist meditation. And at the same time, I was going to yoga because I got a taste of that. I wanted more of it. So yoga became a big part of my life increasingly, and meditation became part of my life. And the channel started opening up more. And then, that was sort of the moment of the shift of, oh my God, there is so much more out there to this world. And somehow I have access to it all through my mind once I get quiet. And then it became this insatiable thirst for knowledge. So reading books, podcasts, YouTube, like you mentioned. And at the same time, it was also, I am so enamored with this new way of being. I'm so much happier. I love myself in a different way. I understand people in a different way. I'm so different. And then all of the people that I was spending time with socially, I started noticing things. They were gossiping about each other. They were binge drinking. And both of those two things in particular became so abhorrent to me, and not I'm not judging it way, but I just can't be around it way.
Yeah.
And I became really sensitive to energy, which meant that I just spent a lot of time alone and spent a lot of time in nature. I stopped wanting to listen to music with lyrics because I was sensitive to that all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just went through this period of almost like a honeymoon with God. That sounds so strange, but I was going hiking all the time. I was studying meditation. I was reading spiritual books. I was sort of like floating through the world, and my experiences with other people became much more meaningful. And I guess I've been on that journey ever since. So that's the story of my spiritual awakening.
I love it. So much of that resonates with mine, obviously in very different ways, but honestly, actually, you actually made me remember that one of my first spiritual awakenings was in Shavasana as well.
Wow.
It was, I didn't quite have this like channel open up where I got some type of message from spirit or God, or however you want to say it. However, I was in Bali, and I was in Shavasana at a yoga retreat, and this song came on. It's called Bergs by Mount Wolf. If anybody wants to look it up, I can put it in the show notes. And all of a sudden, I think it's Alan Watts just speaking, and he just starts talking about life and how we get so caught up in our mind, and it's like, so we make life so complicated. And it just has to be easy. It just can be easy, where you just like go out and experience the world, which was exactly what I was doing in that moment. I was experiencing the world. I was taking photos at a yoga retreat. I was going to waterfalls in Bali, and I was just exploring. And then at the end, it's like, well, you go find out what you love and what it made an impact on you, and then you want to share that with others. And I truly believe that that's my lifelong mission now. It's like I go out, I've done all these things, and it's the way I'm building Light Club. And I truly think that I will never get bored with this. Like people think like, oh, I'll get bored with my company. I'll get bored and I'll have to do this thing. Like I have so many things I've already done that I want to bring into other people's worlds and have new experiences with those people. So it was like a moment of like, oh, that's what life is about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what life is about.
Yes, I love that. And it's so funny because once you go through a spiritual awakening and you sort of integrate it and you're on the other side, because there's an integration period. You don't really just get to go out in the world. You need that chrysalis, like a butterfly has, just to kind of be alone, absorb the information, shed the old layers, bring in the new. There's a period of time where that's a very personal journey, but once you're on the other side of that, you have to go back, like you just said, chop water.
Chop wood, carry water, I think it is, something like that.
Thank you. um Maybe if you're really enlightened you can chop water, I don't know.
Yeah.
um so you have to go back out into the world and you have to talk to people that aren't on the same frequency, and every once in a while you'll be talking to someone and they'll say something or something comes up and you just like look at them and you're like, wait, you're like, you know what's up,
Yeah.
and then once you realize that somebody like gets it, then the conversation is so much more meaningful and it's so beautiful, and you just want more of that in your life, so you start to gravitate more and more towards those types of people, and that's when life becomes really interesting.
It does for sure. And I think we talked about being on the same frequency with people. And I want to bring that down to ground a little bit for people too, because I had this awareness at the last Tony Robbins. He says the two things in life that drive human behavior are beliefs and values.
Mhm.
And when you start to go down this path, you start to shift beliefs with people to believe more in the universe. You start to shift beliefs that there's something else guiding us. You start to shift beliefs of how you want to live your life and not be drinking all weekend, but maybe just exploring an Airbnb at a place with your friends and going out in nature and doing things. Um, so it is like a literal shift of a frequency, because a belief is a feeling of certainty that something is true.
Mhm.
And it is also a filter. So if I say something to you and it goes through your belief filter, you get an output emotion, which is a frequency.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so now like we're shifting into that, like, oh, her beliefs are similar to mine. And nobody's going to have the same exact beliefs, but it's definitely shifting into these different frequencies together. And then like, I truly believe this is the way we're meant to go. We're meant to shift people's beliefs so that they believe more in higher power, so they believe more in spirit, so they believe they're being guided. So it takes a lot of time, honestly, to go down that first, and don't feel upset that it's scary as you're starting to go through it, I think.
Definitely. And there's another thing that you just brought to my mind is that once you kind of have this awakening, you're just like, oh my God, I want to share this with everybody. But you really feel like you can't because they're not
Yep.
gonna believe or be able to resonate. But here's a really important point is that you don't teach people by telling them. You teach people by being it. So once you have a spiritual awakening, your whole vibration shifts, your frequency elevates, and you operate in the world in a different way. And people can see and sense that about you. And they will therefore get curious about what you've been doing. And then they'll ask. I think that it's incredibly unhelpful to try to evangelize your spirituality and push it down the throats of other people. That's violating their free will, and honestly it's not going to do what you want it to do anyway. You can impact so many more people just by operating in the world and being this higher elevated consciousness. And I mean, that's, you just be the lighthouse is what I'm trying to say.
I think that's really important, actually, and something I think that my soul was meant to learn in this lifetime, because I like, oh my gosh, you wake up and you're like, I want everybody to know this.
Yes.
And it doesn't work that way. And I wish it did, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And you have actually behind you the chakra system, I think, on your wall. And the truth is, when I started to go down this path, that Bali experience, and then more things, I started to notice things in movies. Have you ever watched Doctor Strange?
I don't think so.
It's a good one. It's actually very similar to the real life story of Dr. Joe Dispenza, because
Oh,
he
cool.
got hurt and he used his mind. He had to actually go to India to basically heal himself, because nothing in Western medicine. Dr. Strange was a surgeon, and he was like very like in the logical, it must be science, must be physics, all this stuff. And he was like, nothing is working. And so he found somebody that healed himself, and he was like, okay, how did you do this? So being curious, like you said, went and asked this guy. He's like, well, I went to India and I started to go to this temple, and I went to this temple. So I'm watching this movie in the middle of my spiritual awakening, and I'm like starting to get curious. I'm like, they're talking about this chakra system, they're starting to talk about these things. So I was like, are they trying to tell me something here? And
Mhm.
I wasn't aware totally of chakras and believing that that was real at the time, but I started to be curious and say, okay, is this real? What are they trying to teach me here? And then that started to be like, oh, that's real. Like everything that they're talking
Yeah.
about in this movie is real. And these movies are actually teaching us the truth if we are open to realizing that this isn't just science fiction. This is real stuff.
Yeah, symbols are so powerful in conveying like a really complex idea system, and you start to notice the symbols everywhere. I mean, even in the U.S. dollar, for example, there's a triangle with an eye, and that was a symbol of the founding fathers used with what's that society they were part of?
There's a lot of different things. There's what's it called? Freemasons.
That's
And
that's when I
yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so so symbols are really powerful and you start to notice them everywhere. But what you just made me think of is during my spiritual awakening, there was that undeniable feeling of, oh my God, you're trying to tell me something. I knew that I was being led towards information. And it was this visceral feeling of seeing something like you just mentioned, like maybe it was the chakra system, or even talking to somebody and hearing a message and just knowing that I was meant to hear that and feeling really lucky and blessed. Like, why me? Why am I all of a sudden getting all of these downloads, this information? And it was really cool. I mean, even in this conversation, and that's the thing, is when it's a spiritual awakening, when you're at the beginning of it, it's like, wow, this is so cool. And I can't believe this is happening. And then as years go by, it's sort of just like the expectation.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going to happen to me every day.
And sometimes I forget, and actually it's important to remind yourself, because like, oh, that triple one over there, like if I pay attention, there might be a message there. And really getting yourself into that frequency, like we talked about earlier, can bring more of those messages to you, which can guide you more. And I think that that's part of why this conversation and our community is important, is that when we work together and help each other believe it more, that they
Yeah.
are guiding us, that then those messages will come to us faster and we can accelerate our changes and everything like that too.
Yes. And so this morning I was meditating and my guides said, talk about us. And I was like, oh God,
Yeah.
because again, like we still have this wounding of judgment. And I don't want to talk about the fact that
Yeah.
I guides that talk to me every day, but they do. And that was when I mentioned the channel that opened up in Savasana. That's what that was, is we all have we are a physical body. We have a physical body, but we are much more than that. We also have an etheric body, an astral body. We have a soul that is non-dependent on time and space. And
Yep.
so that soul is still in communication with us all the time. And we have access to it when we open ourselves to that. And so I get messages all the time from my guides, from spirit, from my soul, whatever language
Yep.
kind of resonates. And yeah, so every day I try every day to get to that stage of being receptive to it. And I will write down things that they say, and it's so beautiful, but I know that I did not write that, you
Yeah.
know? And then there's a lot of Abraham Hicks is a famous channel, and I love her slash his so much. A Course in Miracles, and yeah, like we are all channels of that, which is really cool.
Absolutely. And as you said, talk about us, my guides talk to me.
Wow,
So,
that.
so the way I kind of, I'm struggling. I don't. necessarily always get like, oh my gosh, this is like do this through. Not quite yet. Sometimes I have. But what I do get quite often is a tug on my heart and a feeling. And it's like the guides are like, hey, I'm here. Like, and I just felt that as soon as you said that. And then tears and like emotional bubble up.
Yeah.
And that was exactly what happened as soon as you said that. So actually, like, we should talk about them a little bit more, I guess, because they just told us. And I'd love to know what you think about them. When I first started learning about spirit guides, my friend Christy, who just came on a Croatia trip with us, we were in Mexico, and we were actually building 2 houses in Mexico that weekend. It was a volunteer trip. And she looked at me straight in the eye and she said, you don't have to prove everything. That's a message from your guides.
Wow.
So she like channeled it through, and she's like a really strong channel. I would love to introduce you to her soon. And she just like stood there right in the face. And I will never forget that moment, because right, we like had to prove everything. It had to be science based. I mean, all this stuff. And it's like, I can't prove this, but I can tell you that that emotion literally in my body as we're on this call just bubbled up, and it's real.
Yeah.
So it was very powerful. And she told me, supposedly you have at least 2 guides that are always with you. And there's more can come in and out. And all of a sudden, actually on this trip, she was channeling and she told me that I have a tech guide, which I actually believe.
That's so
Um,
cool.
it's so weird. So like they're literally helping me code, and like they'll do stuff with Facebook and Instagram and do stuff so that I see messages in the right time. And it's a open awakening to some of the darkness in the world. They use that a lot. There was a lot of things that we'll talk about in another podcast on the darkness side, but
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was like, oh,
yeah, we're not gonna talk about that in this one.
I go there because I
But
just got initiated into the darkness myself, and it's still like,
yeah, we're not going that we're not going on this call, but they do use the guides are using, like, there will be tech, they'll go through Instagram, they'll go through Facebook, and it sounds crazy, but I can tell you, I don't believe that anything else could be it. Like the amount of synchronicities and the amount of times I've seen 888, 111, when I see it at that moment is really, really powerful. And then it associates the meaning of like, oh, this is the truth. So that's been my experience of like, you do have spirit guides that are with you all day long. They're here with us right now. And clearly they told us to
100%.
talked about. So
Yeah, and our spirit guides, they want us to listen to them, but we're not always able to, because when we're in our minds, the monkey minds, the I need to do, and the overanalyzing and the fear, we're literally unable to receive messages from them. And
yeah.
so it's like the first order of business, if you want to receive messages from them, is learning how to calm your mind down.
Yeah. If you have, has there been any messages that you've received from them that like literally shift, like obviously that first one on the yoga mat, but like in a normal life, like I'm just curious, like how often do you get messages, or has there been something big that shifted your life when you're just in your normal life?
A lot of times it happens during meditation, but sometimes it does happen in my normal life. So it'll usually be when I'm kind of pondering a question, and then this instant answer will just come in, and it's really calm, and it's almost like someone's like, like da, 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 like just whispering it in my ear. It's never this urgent, loud, scary message, which is, we get those too from our nervous system when our nervous system becomes activated. It's called anxiety. Um,
Hmm.
I think I had something recently that I can share. Oh, so I recently lost my dog, which was really, really hard for me. He did not die, which is good, but he's not with me anymore. And I was crying and I was so upset. And I sort of had this thought of like, how much am I going to suffer? Like how much suffering am I going to experience with this? I'm so done. And this voice came that it was like, you're going to suffer the appropriate amount. And I was like, what? What does
Wow.
it even mean? And then it was like, yeah, you're going to suffer the appropriate amount based on how much resistance you have to this experience. So it was like, you're going to suffer. That's part of this human life, but it's the resistance to the suffering of like, I don't want to feel this way.
Right.
That's where you increase the suffering. So you can decrease it by just saying, I'm suffering, I'm sad. That's okay. I'm going to sit in this. And the appropriateness of the amount of your suffering will depend on your ability to just like witness it, sit with it, and accept it. So
Absolutely. I think that's part about the presence, and meditation can help you with that presence and feeling those emotions. And I love Tony Robbins. Like I love going. He gives you the resources to shift your emotional state, and that's really powerful. And I strongly encourage people to learn how to shift their emotional state, because there's many ways that it's helped me. However, something that we don't often talk about enough is like, okay, you do have to spend time sometimes to deal with those older emotions that are stuck there. And he actually does something called the Dickens process, where we're able to, during that event, dive deep into stuff that doesn't feel so good. And if you dive into it and feel it, it's like overcoming like fear in many ways, where once you deal with it, it no longer controls your life anymore.
yes,
And I think that's important.
definitely. And that's another thing. I don't think we can really talk about a spiritual awakening without talking about shadow work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And in my experience, and I don't know if this is how most people experience it, but I had this initiation into my spiritual life, this awakening. It was so beautiful. I felt like I was drinking from the fire hose of life. It was just like amazing. And then it was like, okay, now you got to deal with your shadows.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, this part sucks. I don't like this. But that's what it is. It's looking at your old wounds and being able to go back to your younger self and heal them with your mind. And it's not fun. It's very messy.
It is. And something that like I got so excited when I quit my job. It was 2016, May 5th of 2016. I remember the date exactly. And the thing I did first was this thing called Nomad Cruise, which I met your sister on. And not that particular one, but one later. But when I went, it was the first time I felt deeply, deeply connected for 2 weeks to another group of humans. We had so much fun. We were traveling at sea. You couldn't go anywhere. You're on a floating building. So you are connecting, you're going and learning from other people at these talks, you're having dinner with people. And I felt on top of the world. And I think part of this spiritual awakening is that you have to go through these huge highs and huge emotional lows.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I got off that cruise ship, it was one of the lowest moments I've ever felt. And it felt horrible because all this connection that I just learned about for the first time was ripped away from me. And I was like, oh my God, I literally got physically sick, didn't feel good for about 4 days. And I just went super low. But then I pulled myself back up and reconnected and started going to different places. And it took several years, and it still happens. Like we go through these super high highs and super low lows. And I really think that's part of the journey. You have to deal with the lows to get back up to the highs.
Yeah, and not judging yourself for experiencing the lows. This is what I work with so many of my clients, because most of my clients as a coach are dealing with really painful life transitions, especially around heartbreak, divorce, breakups, things like that. And when you are going through something that's really, really low, there's this idea of, I want to fix it. You know, when we get sick, we take a pill, we fix it. When there's a problem, we just fix it. But that's not how it works with our emotions. Our emotions want to be seen and heard and witnessed, and then they have to be metabolized fully. And if they are not metabolized, they linger and they get stuck in our bodies, and it creates disease. And so it's a skill to be able to sit there and actually feel your feelings. And of course, a lot of us grew up in households where it was like, you better stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about. Or made to feel like our emotions we were not safe to express them, and our parents felt uncomfortable when we were experiencing emotions. So it's very much this process of learning how to reparent yourself. And it doesn't come easy to most people. That's the work that I do. And then another thing that you just brought up that made me think of this really important word, which is community. So community is something that we need as humans, just like we need sunlight and air. And if you look at any group of animals, whether they're penguins or monkeys, any social animal, which we are, you see them, they're always with their tribe, they're always with their group, they're always together, they're experiencing life together. And that's how we were designed to experience life as well. And when we don't have that, we feel like there's something massive missing in our lives. And when you just described you had that experience of incredible community on the Nomad cruise, and then you came out of it, and I'm not surprised that that impacted you in a really unfun way, because community is one of those things that we desperately need, that we all, especially after the past few years, don't
Yeah.
have. And so when you're going through a spiritual awakening, you're going through that period of isolation where the community that you used to belong to probably is not a fit anymore, and you have to be in this void, this isolation period. That's what you're missing, is community. And the great thing about the spiritual life, the spiritual world, is that there are so many amazing communities. I've met so many amazing people through the yoga community, through the Tibetan Buddhist community. That's the thing that it's given me the most, is I kind of know that no matter where I am in the world, no matter what city I'm in, I can find like-minded people, just because the communities that surround these ideas.
Yeah. And you feel more supported and like you're not crazy. And honestly, we need each other to believe in ourselves more and to push each other forward. And it sometimes gives us more energy to like get things done quickly, so you can kind of quantum leap. But yeah, it's been a huge journey for me. And in 2019, I felt so guided. It was like God, the universe, source was like, go here, do this, do this, do this, go literally live in a co-living house together with people before the world shifted in 2020, because they needed me to see what community looked like, and they needed me to see like what it could be. And obviously it can become more than what it already is, in my opinion. That's why I'm trying to create why I am creating what we are creating here. But it was really important, and it felt guided, and like my spirit guides are like, community is so important, and you are meant to go build this in the world, and we need you to know about it. So
I love that. And that's a beautiful thing, to build a community. I mean, that is giving people something that they desperately need and have been deprived of.
it's definitely something that's been challenging for the last couple of years. People have been so disconnected, and that's where I hope that we can come in. We can come in to help support people's businesses. We can come in to help support people just feeling connected, travel together. Eventually, I'd love to have chapters. So you're in LA, I'm here on the East Coast. We can have different chapters, so we can go travel and find like-minded people around the world. So I definitely see that happening too.
That would be so cool. I love that idea. And for anyone that's, listening, that's just going through this and they're thinking there's no community I could belong to, I just have to say that it's pretty normal to feel that way.
Yep.
And you might be a little bit isolated for a little while. And back to what we were just talking about, it's important to honor that feeling and to really sit with it. And just know that you're not going to be alone and isolated for long. Like, your community will find you. Of course, you do have to kind of meet the universe halfway with all things. You can't just expect to meet your community by just sitting there and not doing anything, but you'll be guided for sure to find the people that are meant to be in your life.
Absolutely. And I think that's, like as we learn how to do the inner work, we're guided more, and it is powerful. And sometimes people come into Light Club or Nomad Cruise, and then they go out, and it's like, it's either for a period of time or for a lifetime. But every single time I've joined something and done something, it's always given me a gift that's propelled me farther in life.
Oh, I love
So
that. Yes, yes, yes. And another thing is that you don't know who around you is already on the path, because like we were talking about earlier, it's not something most people tend to broadcast. So you'll be very surprised at the people that maybe are already in your life that resonate with you, if you have the bravery to talk about it.
absolutely. So we have a few minutes left. Would love to know, how you work with clients, what you're super excited about building right now, and anything else you want to share with the audience as well.
Yeah. So I consider myself a human behavior specialist. And I also, have this very strong, powerful connection to my spiritual life. So the way I work with clients is that I hold space for them. I allow them to process their feelings, give them a safe container to do so, and talk with them in a very gentle, loving way about what patterns they've had in their lives, why those patterns exist, and give them somatic healing tools to be able to sit there and process these feelings. And all of my clients, I've got to say, my business is fairly new. It's less than a year old. All of my clients have wanted to re-up and be clients, extend their contract. And all of them have said that my work has really changed their life in a huge way. And I think that a lot of the work I do is really guided. It's not that I have this methodology that's precise with each that I just replicate across all clients. I tailor it to what they need, and I tend to get it right. So I feel really good about that.
I love that. Yeah, I think that that's something that's super special about our community is this, it's each person can be different. And yes, I have a core framework for my coaching as well, but each person, we kind of go and do what that person needs. And I also feel very guided through building Light Club. I think that that's something that the spirit is guiding us to build these things and work together more. And I think as you were able to channel and help people from other guidance outside of this realm, it's what we need to do to kind of get to the next level of our life. So I applaud for you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Back at you. I love meeting people that are in the light, following their guides, and just living their true, authentic selves. Because I think that before you have a spiritual awakening, and when you're looking at yourself your past self, you're like, wow, I wasn't authentic at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are walking around, they don't even know who they are. They don't even know why they're suffering. And that's so sad to me.
And it just takes work, and it takes being compassionate with yourself. I think it's like you don't have to know it all. You just every little step every day, like learn something a little bit new. You won't even recognize yourself by the end of the year if you start to like be open to walking down that path. And yeah, I think that's a good note to end on too, is like I used to be very judgmental of anything that, like stuff that we're talking about on this call. And I used to be very judgmental, or at least like distant to change. I'm actually very, very proud of myself to see where I've come in 10 years. 10 years ago, I was doing more. So I was doing coaching, but it started with dating coaching. I wanted to date more.
Was too. That's what I was doing 10 years ago. Stop it. So
you took dating coaching, or were a dating coach?
No, I was a dating coach 10 years ago. Like
I love that. Well, I was being coached, but I love that you
Okay.
were dating coached. That's amazing. And I just look at myself and like, I'm proud of myself for actually going down that path and hiring that coach, because that now has propelled me forward. It's propelled me forward in business. It's propelled me forward in other areas of my life, because going and doing dating coaching actually helps everything else. Everything is connected.
So true. So true. And that's like the thing that I just want to say is that I realized, so I've been coaching for 10 years. I've done things in between that, but I've been a coach since 2012. And the thing that I noticed about every successful person that I knew or know still is that they have a coach, whether it's an actor with an acting coach or an executive with an executive coach. And even like my sister hired a coach, and that totally up-leveled her life in a major way. And hiring a coach, just like you said, even if it's, I want to solve this specific problem, which is my dating life, it will help you in every other area of life. Hiring a coach is such a powerful thing. I think everyone should do it. I have a coach too.
I love that. And yeah, I think it's really important, and something that we're here to work on that together. We can coach each other as well within our community. So I'm just proud of myself. And that's actually the last question. I have two questions for you to end. If you could speak to yourself 10 years ago, I want you to give them a message. What would you tell them? And then I want you to think 50 years in the future, this older, wiser version of yourself is speaking to you now. What would they be telling you?
If I could speak to myself 10 years ago, I would just give her a lot of comfort. She was very nervous about everything. I would say, it's okay. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Like, you are exactly where you need to be. You're going to be fine. And it's not that serious.
I love that.
Yeah. And the second question was if 50 years.
If yeah, so your older, wiser version of yourself, 50 years from now, what would they be telling you today?
I feel like they'd be saying a very similar thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they'd be saying it's all okay. All the things that you're worried about right now are not that big. It's not that big of a deal. Just stay close to God and you're going to be okay. Try to enjoy yourself.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a big part of what we're doing here is we need to enjoy the journey. We weren't meant to just put money in the bank account to start to try to experience life at 65. We are meant to enjoy the journey today. And I think that's another important message that I'm trying to give to the world is like, we can figure out how to make our lives awesome today. And it doesn't have to be so scary and so much in scarcity. We can live in abundance along the way too.
Oh, hallelujah. Amen. So agree with that.
So, Emily, I really, really appreciate your time, your energy, the conversation. I hope people got some super big value adds out of this conversation and know that you're not alone. How do people find you? How do people connect with you?
My TikTok and my Instagram are both uplevel with Emily, and my website is uplevelwithemily.com.
Amazing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being the pilot episode of the Light Club podcast. I can't wait to see where this goes. And I will definitely be interviewing you in the future as well, once this kind of grows an audience as well. So thank you for taking the time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.